If I were to ask you to switch roles and suggest what you think would be an appropriate response framework, what, Rajiv, are your suggestions?
Well, in one sentence, I would say we have to move from a herd mentality to herd immunity. Because from whatever I have heard, and I am not an epidemiologist, I am not even a doctor, but that's the only concept that makes sense to me. What that means to me is that we should have done this before, and if we haven't, then at least we should do this now, is to let the robust population in the age of, let's say, 15 to 50 or 20 to 60, something like that, go back to their normal life. Let them start moving the economy forward as they used to, and let them slowly get infected and acquire herd immunity. Believe in Ayurveda or homeopathy, etc., those solutions are also available. And obviously, all of us will take the necessary precautions because nobody wants to die. Then the next step would have been, and if we had done this between March and May, probably we would be in a position like Stockholm, where we would be approaching herd immunity in a few weeks' time. Then we could have probably contemplated opening our schools and colleges so that the younger folk under the age of 15 or 20 could go back in a few months' time, by July or so, and get on with their academic pursuits. And finally, I don't know, maybe in August, in September, at some time then, we could relax as far as the elderly and the immunocompromised are concerned. So I think in some such phases, we have to look at our people, because in the end, Rahul, the virus does not kill geography, it doesn't kill zones, it kills people. I think we have to work very hard to bring the confidence back in people, because right now people are behaving, after this 8 weeks of brainwashing, they are behaving as if the corona is a contagious cancer. And if I get it, I will die. People are absolutely paranoid. And the way we have brainwashed people has turned people against people. That's going to take some time to overcome. Hi, Rahul. Well, from my point of view, for several times, I'm not an expert when it comes to deciphering the details of such a package, but I would have frankly expected something that was simpler, that was more specific, and that was more sustainable. Like the kind of support that I hear has been forthcoming in the West. I have been talking to my counterpart at KTM, CEO Stefan Pierer. Over there, for example, 85% of the employee cost is being reimbursed by the government. Let me give you another example of a college friend of mine that runs a small outfit, no more than 8 people in Detroit, Michigan. He just received, I think, most of the employee cost was reimbursed to him by the government on the condition that he keeps them all on the rolls. So that's the kind of very direct, very substantial benefit that people are receiving in other parts of the world. Well, I think first of all, we could have seen direct money in the hands of people, significant direct money in the hands of people, particularly the poor, not just the migrants, but even the others who have been displaced. I have read that 12 crore people have lost their jobs. That's a huge number. I have not heard anything towards that end. In terms of businesses also, what's the government going to do? The government is not going to reimburse me my material cost or marketing cost or bear the cost of my interest and depreciation. But surely, again, in terms of employee wages, there could have been a lot of assistance. Although, I have to say at this point that I am of the view that almost all of that should go to the MSME who really need it. Because I feel that if a big company like Bajaj Auto gets a part of it, it comes at the expense of someone else. Because the government cannot cover everybody 100%. Frankly, this also stems from the fact that I'm not very happy about the fact that big businesses are not speaking up. They are not speaking out. They are not conveying their views as we should in a free country about what we think is amiss and what needs to be done. I mean, in this country, it seems as if, only the young and the poor and the ladies will speak up. But big names in business, in sports, in entertainment never speak up. Maybe they don't deserve a stimulus.
Wow. Wow, that's scathing coming from you. Why do you think that's the case? What is it that you think they're saying in private, which the government and the country needs to hear, which is not being spoken of, Mr. Bajaj?
Well, I can only speak for myself and say that when I am sometimes counseled by people not to express views like this in public, I always say that I have always believed that the reason I live in India and not in China is because I feel that I am free to give my opinion so long as it comes from a good place, it is objective, it is based on facts, and I have no malified intention. It could be the UPA government, it could be the NDA government. If I was not comfortable speaking up, maybe I should move to North Korea or Venezuela. But I'm very comfortable, and frankly, I have faced no repercussion on this count, at least not so far. So why do others not speak up? I mean, some do. I mean, for example, I would say Kiran Mazumdar-Shaw is a fine example. Mr. Murthy sir is a great example. It's not as if nobody else does, but I think a lot more people need to speak up and speak out. And frankly, it's for them to say why they don't do that more often.
How has your business been impacted because of the COVID-induced lockdown? How are you managing at Bajaj Auto and all the other companies in which you are a director?
Well, my focus is really only Bajaj Auto, and the short answer is business has been zero for 8 weeks. As you're probably aware, we are fortunate to be a large exporter. Almost half of what we make is exported, but you can't export unless you can make. Since we've been locked down, like everyone else has been, and business has therefore been zero. We've started up slowly, limping, haltingly, in erratic fashion right now, because I think the administration has to come to terms with the reality that when you think in terms of health, you may think in terms of zones, red, orange, and green. But when you talk in terms of economy or industries, particularly like ours, which are an integrated industry, which are a chain of suppliers, sub-suppliers, dealers, and sub-dealers, then unless you have unlocked the entire chain, nothing will come out from the output side. And this is what we are facing. So I can tell you that there have been days in the last couple of weeks when at our plants in Maharashtra, at Pune and Aurangabad, we've been up to like 15% capacity. And there are days again when we've been at 0% capacity, because in a so-called red zone or containment zone, despite the best intentions and actions of the collector and the commissioners, if the local MLA who thinks of himself as being the custodian of the health of the people in that zone, or worse still, his goons who think that they are corona warriors at this time, are going to stop people from boarding buses or stop a small supplier from supplying to a bigger supplier who supplies to Bajaj Auto, we cannot produce on that day because without a cable, I cannot make the whole motorcycle and I can't ship it out. So, whether it's for exports or for the domestic market, it's a very poor show at this point of time. Nobody locked down as harshly as India did, and they have also opened up a lot sooner. So I was again speaking with Stefan Perer yesterday, and he said to me that progressively, virtually all of Europe is opened up in terms of dealerships. And this is what I have been requesting for in this country, because unless you open up the tap at the front end, there is little point in producing at the back end. And today we are seeing that wherever markets are being opened up, I can tell you, China, France, Spain, which were hit so hard, barring Italy, of course, that is a big problem, but Italy is always a problem. And then even in the US, actually in our business, the growth of the small and medium displacement motorcycle is actually ahead of last year, because partly suppressed demand is coming back. Partly, I think people need a feel-good factor. They need a mood elevator, so they need to go out and shop and do something nice to feel better about life. And partly, there is definitely a structural change away from public transportation to affordable individual mobility. So that is working well for us. And again, even in across the markets of Africa, even in a lot of LATAM and ASEAN countries, we do not have the disruption we have here. Cambodia, Thailand, Malaysia, Philippines, Indonesia, they've all been through a difficult time, but I think they've all been extremely pragmatic, not just in a business sense or a dealership sense or a production sense, but in terms of the degree of inconvenience that people have been put through.
So you're saying that maybe the Indian lockdown was, especially in your experience in comparison to other countries that you're dealing with, over the top and not required in that sense?
It has been completely over the top. First of all, I think we have benchmarked the West in terms of the infection and in terms of deaths particularly, which is in the end what is most important, I suppose. And that has not been borne out. Why an Asian country would exclusively almost seem to benchmark the West, I don't understand. And thereafter now, when it is becoming clear that although cases will continue to rise, because in the end, this is a virus and no lockdown is impervious. So the virus is going to hang around. And as the Swedish chief scientist said, the hallmark of this pandemic is that the healthy young will be lying in wait silently to infect the vulnerable old. So you can only prepone or postpone the infection. You can't really eliminate it. And I think that's what we are seeing. And instead of accepting that as a reality, look at what my state has done. I think Maharashtra is the premier state of this country. And apparently they are going to extend the lockdown to the 31st. And, I just don't get it. I have asked everyone in this, well, not everyone, but a lot of important people in the state's administration, please tell me, what is that parameter, what is that metric that you're waiting for, which, when it happens, will motivate you and give you the confidence to unlock? Everybody just looks at everybody else and smiles and says, we have no idea, we are confused, we are just doing what the boss is telling us to do. I mean, who is the boss? I don't know. Where does the buck stop on this?
The government can argue, Mr. Bajaj, in its defense, that you and others are now, in hindsight, being able to say what you are, because we've been able to ward off the infection. There hasn't been a surge of patients lining up breathless at India's ICUs. And if that had happened, then we wouldn't be able to say what we are right now. We've, in fact, the government can say in its defense, been able to avert a massive public health emergency like what Italy, Spain and the United States have had to face.
Well, I would partly agree with them. It's very easy to speak from the sidelines when you're in the hot seat and it's your leg that's out there. I can understand that. But I would say up to a point, we had a lot of data coming in from the Asian countries, say even from Singapore, which locked down for a second time. To what extent did they lock down? To what extent did they disrupt small and big businesses? To what extent did they make life difficult for their people? Can people step out of their apartments or not? Can they walk to the grocery store or not? Can they visit friends or not? Can they go and get a haircut or not? We knew all that. And yet we've gone completely over the top, and we continue to go that way. We are now apparently going to head into the fourth lockdown while the world is opening up. And my problem is that even today, we are not hearing anything specific, whether it's from the center or the state. Somebody has to tell us that when cases become near zero, we will unlock. Then why are they unlocking now? When cases start to turn south significantly, we will unlock. If that is so, why are you unlocking now? When the doubling rate becomes 15, we will unlock. Fine, but what will happen when we will unlock? If 15 becomes 7 again, are you going to lock us down again? What are we going to do, given that it seems, and you might know this better than me, that there is a second wave that has already started in Korea and Taiwan and China. If that is true and that is headed our way in 6 months' time, how are we preparing ourselves for that? People talk so much, Rahul, about the flattening of this curve. The curve of 1.4 billion people is not a curve. It's a tsunami. If you just put the math to it and assume that 10% of those people are old and 10% have other comorbidities, you are talking of 280 million people, let's say 300 million. If you assume that 20 or 30% of that is going to get into serious trouble, you're talking of 60, 70, 80 million people. Let somebody come out and tell us that we are flattening the curve because we are ready with the medical infrastructure, or will shortly be ready to handle with beds, with nursing staff, with ventilators, respirators, or whatever they call it, for 60, 70 million people. I have not seen information like this. And let them just stand up and say, you are wrong. We are ready. That would be great. That's the news I'm waiting to hear. But this is not what we are hearing. What we are hearing is all the tamasha that you are as well about. About as I am.
But the government is dealing with many variables and moving parts, all of which are functioning at the same time. And it's not as if, unlike any other scenario where you know exactly what the mortality rate is, what can happen now. There's a new Kawasaki disease that's made a re-emergence in some places in the United States and elsewhere. So the government doesn't have, Mr. Bajaj, answers to all these questions. They're good questions, piercing, scathing questions, but there are no answers, not just with the Indian government, but globally.
Yeah, Peter Drucker said, the danger in turbulent times is not the turbulence, but to steer with old logic. I am only asking, to the extent I am also a concerned citizen and an affected party, just one simple question. Please tell me, based on what criteria will you unlock, and what are those specific, tangible steps you are taking on the ground to go towards that? Don't echo this thing at me that we have arranged these many trains and these many food packets, and now the power consumption is already at 30% in this place. I mean, these are all red herrings. They don't give us a clear picture. I mean, has anyone articulated clearly when we will unlock and why? And if they don't have an answer, let them say that we cannot unlock for the next 6 months. I mean, look at this. We were told the peak of the virus would be 12th of April. Then we were told it would be 1st to 15th of May. I am now reading in various media that it may be June or it may be July. So are we going to be shut down for another 8 weeks, 10 weeks, 4 months? Do we not deserve any clarity at all?
Okay.